about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This program gives voters the information they need for the May 18th municipal primary election directly from the candidates. It's probably the only place you get to hear the candidates speak for themselves. And this is a joint project of the League of Women Voters of Berks County and Berks Community Television. Both are nonpartisan organizations. We never support or oppose political parties nor candidates. The featured office today is Reading City Council. Council members act on legislation, they set the budget, and they confirm appointments of the city manager and members of boards. They must live in their district for 1 year prior to the primary election and must remain residents in their district through their term. They serve part-time, it's a 4-year term, and the salary is $5,000 per year. Now, Democratic voters will select one of two candidates in District 1, which is Southwest Reading, and one of two candidates in District 2, which is Southeast Reading. The two candidates in District 1 are Hector Ruiz and Brianna Tyson. The two candidates in District 4 are Wesley Savon Butler and Marmaru Stratton. They will be asked the same questions in the same order with the same general time limit. And each candidate's views are their own, not those of the League or BCTV. And today, our candidate is Wesley Butler. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, please tell us why you want to serve on City Council and what your qualifications are for this position, and take 2 minutes.
All right, so my reason for running for District 4 City Council is, living in Reading for about to be 20 years, I've heard many people say that they want Reading to be a place where their kids can come back and raise their families, a place where they can have a good paying job so they don't have to, rent their homes, they can own their homes, just a clean and safe environment so that their families can stay here and that they don't have to go outside of Reading to find, good paying jobs or to experience nightlife or have a clean and safe environment. And my qualifications, I would say I'm a sophomore at Kutztown University. So I'm a communications major. Also, living in the city of Reading my whole life, I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs. I've seen the celebrations, and I have a good sense of, what the city needs and, what the city has to be built on to be successful and to have a better future. And so I've worked with the youth endlessly, whether it's basketball camps or, mentoring them on the many school levels, just mentoring the youth and, picking their brain and seeing what they like to see in this city.
And what kind of special training, if any, do you think a person should have to serve on City Council? You can take a minute.
I would say you definitely need leadership, but then also you need to be able to, have a good sense of what the community needs in terms of especially with budgets, because when you look at all the budgets, money's gonna go different places. And that needs to be dependent on, what your community needs and what they want.
And what are the most important concerns of the people in your district? And take a minute and a half on this one.
Okay. I would say in District 4, definitely the trash haul was the biggest issue. And besides, the trash haul, I would say security. There has been a couple, robberies, a few, I think about one murder. And, definitely people in my district are concerned about security. And they told me that when, I go door to door. So that's a big issue as well.
And on the whole, what do you think are the most important issues that City Council will have to address in the next year? And again, I think we're going to go a minute and a half for all the questions for a while here.
So the biggest issue right now is Act 47. And so with Act 47, how are we going to do without, the government funding? How are we going to make up for not getting money to support us and, having our budgets and to make the city go? And so we'll definitely have to come up with economic plans and, a bunch of plans to help generate money for the city. Because, obviously without money, we're going to be back in the hole, and we don't want to get taken over by, the government and, not be able to sustain our city or have control of our city. As our city, we want to make the decisions we're able to control. We don't want anybody else to come in our city and start making decisions because we're not making the right decisions to generate money. So we definitely have to work up some economic plans and, work together as a team. That's the biggest part, with the mayor, everybody in city council, the different departments in our city. We have to come up with plans together that will help benefit the city of Reading.
And what can the city do to encourage economic development to create more jobs?
I would say we need to get more businesses to come to the city of Reading. And I know it sounds easy to say, but that starts off with the quality of life. If I own a business, I want to open a business where there's great quality of life, where the people in the town or city take care of the property, that the city or town offers benefits for me, where I have a great deal where I can profit, and I could create a long lasting business or franchise that I don't have to pick up and move in the next 3 years to move to another town. And so I would say you got to get businesses here. And the city is actually, with College Town, they're in the right direction. College Town is going to bring a bunch of business on Penn Street, and it's going to attract people to our city. There'll be people coming out of town to spend their money, and that's always nice. And so just having, you'll have two colleges there with RAC and Alvernia. That's going to generate a lot of money. You got some great businesses already on Penn Street. And, that's going to go well together.
What can the city do to reduce crime, and especially violent crime, to make the city safer?
I would say, I'm not the police chief, but I would say we have to invest more with the young people. We need, clean and safer parks. We need more mentoring with them, but then also not just young people, we need more mental health facilities and more mental health, clubs. Mental health is a big thing in this city, especially just after, COVID-19. Well, we're still in it, but people's mental health is probably at an all-time low right now. And they need assistance, they need help, they need somebody, they need therapy, and they need our help. And if we don't get them that assistance, it may make them want to go out and commit a crime or do something they're not supposed to. So we really need to invest in the residents of Reading, especially the young people, with mental health facilities and clubs.
And do you favor increasing the size of the police force? And please explain your answer.
Well, I'm more concerned with how police are being trained. I think that's bigger than the size of the police force or, adding more to a police budget. How are they being trained? Also, what's also important is having more police officers who are from or live in the city of Reading on the task force. That is a major issue in this city. We have police officers in the city who live outside the city, and I believe there should be more who live inside the city that are on the task force. And that goes a long way, because if I'm living on the same street as my police officer and I'm getting, mentoring from him, or I know him, I may trust him more when I'm going out on the street. It all works hand in hand. And I'd like to thank Officer Sam Bryant for joining the police force, especially as an African American. There's not many African Americans on the Reading police force, and I'd like to commend him. And we need more Sam Bryants on the police force.
What can the city do to improve parking? One concerned citizen told the League, private companies enforcing parking fines are the worst.
Yes, parking fines. Well, unfortunately, that parking tickets is a big thing in the city. The parking authority makes, I don't know how many millions off of parking tickets a year, but I believe we're gonna need another parking garage. We're gonna need more opportunities for parking with, business, especially downtown businesses coming in. I believe you should have to pay to park, especially with the business that's coming downtown. We're gonna have a lot of people in and out, and with Act 47, that's another way to generate money. But in terms of, the fines and everything, that's just the way for our city to make money. So we gotta pay attention, in terms of, especially when it's street cleaning. I understand maybe we can develop a better plan with street cleaning. I know some people have to wake up at the early hours of the morning to move their car, and that may not work for them. Maybe we could develop a better plan there.
And Reading is also known for its double-parked cars. What could be done to open city streets to moving traffic?
I would say double parking. Wow. I know it's, driving down streets in Reading, it's always difficult with double parked cars. But I would say the only way to help that is if, we have more opportunities for parking. Part of the reason why people double park is because there's not enough spaces, and they say to themselves, oh, well, there's not enough spaces. I just need to go into my friend's house or my mother's house real quick and get something. I'll be right back out. And the only way to stop that is to create more spaces and, more opportunities for parking.
There are patches of deteriorating housing in Reading. What can be done to strengthen code enforcement to limit urban blight?
I would say we need to hold landlords and tenants, notice how I said landlords and tenants, accountable. You know, this is our property in Reading. And, you know, I've talked to a few landlords in Reading, and, you know, they complain about, oh, well, my tenant does this to the property. It shouldn't be my job to clean it up, or we have a problem with tenants when they're moving on to another apartment, they'll damage the one they were in before. And, you know, that's definitely not okay. You know, the tenant needs to be held accountable as well. But I would say in the tenant landlord agreement, you know, there needs to be a clarification on how the property is going to be taken care of. So if the landlord says, you know, no dogs, the landlord said no dogs, and a tenant brings a dog, that should be a fine. You know, we need to hold them both accountable. Same for the landlord. Landlord doesn't, you know, take care of the property and just lets it sit. They need to be fined. And just more accountability on the tenant and landlords.
How will you establish a good working relationship with the mayor, the managing director, and the executive departments?
I would say, you know, working as part of a team on city council, we'll be working with the mayor and other departments of Reading, commissions, and we need to work together as a team. If we don't work together as a team, if we don't get along, you know, the city will go to waste because everybody has a million ideas, but we can't get one done. And so I really stress that we have to work as part of a team.
And what 3 things would you like to accomplish if you're elected?
Yes. So the first one I would say is, you know, bringing businesses to Reading. Like I said, young people tend to leave the city of Reading early. And I'm talking as early as high school. Even before they graduate, when they're able to drop out, they'll drop out and they'll move out the city and find a job. And they shouldn't have to do that. You know, they shouldn't have to go to Philly, go to New York, or, you know, go outside the United States to find a good paying job. We need more opportunities for jobs here so young people can own their homes instead of rent.
And how will you encourage public participation in issues being decided by City Council?
I'm sorry, I wasn't finished answering.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I could continue?
Yeah, continue with the 3 things you wanted to
yes.
accomplish, please.
So, yes, that was, you know, bringing businesses to Reading was one. Second, I would say, I brought up before, mental health facilities, mental health clubs here in Reading to help the residents. You know, that's very important, especially in terms of crime. You know, getting to the bottom of why people are committing crimes, and, you know, finding out if they could get some help to, you know, just better their life. And then third, I would say I want to accomplish nightlife in the city of Reading. Now we have the Pagoda, we have the Schuylkill River, the Firehouse. You know, we have many opportunities here in Reading that, you know, are great opportunities for nightlife. And I want to help accomplish that, whether it's, you know, having events at the Pagoda. They already have, you know, racing, but we need to add to that. Also, City Park with, you know, basketball during the summer. If we could have some sort of a sports fest where we bring a multitude of sports together and, you know, have a sports fest, that will also help generate money in the city of Reading.
Thank you. So let's go on then to how would you encourage public participation in all the issues that are being decided by the council?
I would say, in terms of public participation, show up to the council meetings and, you know, talk about the issues you want to see fixed. And, you know, I think, especially in council, we have to do a better job of, you know, listening to our residents. And, you know, some of them, it's an outcry for help. And it's not just in the meetings. Sometimes it's on social media and they're just not being heard. So definitely just, you know, hearing out our residents. Also, you know, I'm not in the seat yet, but when I'm walking around Reading, residents come up to me and they ask me about issues and what they want to see fixed. And, definitely having an ear for that.
What is your position on funding for the Reading Public Library?
Oh, I have a firm position on that. We definitely need money for the Reading Public Library. Kids need a place, not just in school, but, after school or, on weekends to go to and be able to study or read books. They need a safe place. Not every kid has a safe place to go to after school. And I think we need to start realizing that. And, I have a cool story. When I was in about second grade, me and my friends, especially at 13th and Union, we would go to the Northeast Library. Well, one day, the school, we had a big assembly where they told us that the Northeast Library was closing because they didn't have enough funding for it. And so I believe this was second grade. And so me and my friends and the rest of the school, we helped, collect coins and, collect money, to let the mayor know we want this library open. And we explained to him at the library, it's on 69 News, you can look this up, why the library was important to us and that this was our safe space and where we could study, be able to, read some cool books and just, engage with other friends. So it's very important, especially with our mental health and in terms of a safe place for kids to be at.
Should the city continue to directly operate the recreational services, the parks, the playgrounds, or should this responsibility be transferred to the county?
That our parks and recreation, that belongs to us. We shouldn't let the county control it. And I understand that the recreation budget is, it needs more, and I'm a firm believer in giving the recreation budget more money, But in terms of what the budget's going to look like and how we're going to use it, there should not be locks on playgrounds. These kids, they need a safe place to be at. Now, I understand, locks at nighttime. You want to keep, kids out at nighttime from, doing some other stuff that may be dangerous, but there needs to be more hours in the day where the kids can go and play. Also, I see at 11th and Pike and at Bear Park, in terms of the baseball fields, they're trying to preserve the baseball fields. And, that sort of cuts off, half of the park. But if we're gonna put, locks on the baseball fields so we can preserve it, we also need to build on to the rest of the park. It shouldn't just be basketball courts. We need to have, there's lots of fields, so we need to build onto them. Either, put playground equipment or, just build on to the rest of the park.
Okay. We're going to take a strict 1.5 minute on the next question so you have time for your close. But neighborhoods are the lifeblood of the city. How would you encourage residents to rebuild their own neighborhoods? And should City Council provide tax dollars for neighborhood projects?
City Council should definitely provide tax dollars for neighborhood projects. And what residents, I'm sure they do know, without the tax dollars, you can, while you're walking around, walking your dog, you're going on a run, you can pick up trash and put it, in a trash bin, or you can call the city if you see a property that, looks blighted or, looks abandoned, and let the city know you need to do something about that. But in terms of bringing tax dollars for neighborhood projects, I would love to see it. I would love to walk out my house, go down the street and see a little community garden and, see kids learning about, growing vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. That brings community engagement. Also, helps the kids out in terms of not, just their opportunity to go to the playground to play basketball, to play baseball. They also get an agriculture experience. And, just, like community farms or, a neighborhood community where everybody every week is hosting events or, especially with Earth Day coming up, just having a cleanup at a park or in my district, we have a community pool. So there's a lot of engagement there. So there's a nightlife there as well. But just always having something in the community, especially during the different times of the year where the community can come together, have events, bring their children, just have a great time.
Thank you. And that leaves us 1 minute for you to make a closing statement.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank BCT for having me. I'm running for District 4 City Council. My name is Wesley Butler. Please vote for me on May 18th. If you want your grandchildren, if you want your kids and your grandchildren to live in a safer and clean Reading, also experience nightlife and, have good paying jobs so that they can own their homes instead of rent, vote Wesley Butler on May 18th for District 4 City Council. Also, if you'd like to reach out to me and, contribute to my campaign, you can go on my Facebook page, which is Wes Butler for District 4 City Council. And I have a campaign donation link there at ActBlue. Any donation is well appreciated. And, thank you guys for having me. Please vote for me on May 18th. Let's build a better Reading.
Thank you. And we thank Wesley Butler for sharing his ideas on how to be a Reading City Council member and for sharing his qualifications. Viewers, please remember to vote in the municipal election on May 18th. You must be registered by May 3rd. And to check your registration status or to request a mail-in ballot, go to votespa.com. For more information on the other races on your ballot, you can go to vote411.org. And please, continue to watch BCTV. We will have more candidate interviews, and we will have information about the constitutional amendments that will be on your ballot. And I should note that while Democrats and Republicans vote for the candidates, all voters are needed to vote on those constitutional amendments. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Judith Cranis. Good day.
We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.